me, the issue of charter schools is one that you have to look at both with a telescope on the one hand for some perspective and distance, and also with the microscope.
Originally, part of what's confusing about charter schools is that they started out as a progressive movement, actually. It found something that educators were doing, creating their own chartered schools so that they could experiment with more progressive forms of education. In the hopes of being of having those become almost laboratories of innovation that then would take their discoveries and bring them to the public school system. And at some point what happened was it seems that they've been co-opted by the right-wing, kind of right-wing conservative interests who have an agenda of privatization.
And this is no new fight. It's just a fight that has become anew again in earnest, in the sense that we had gotten away from separate and equal education, where it was so blatant and pervasive. You know, like the Brown versus Board of Ed, we're there again. We had closed the gap, but they are finding new ways to broaden and widen the gap through charter schools. And our contentions are we're not anti-charter, we're pro-education, and the solution is not charter schools, the solution is to fix all schools.
On average, charter schools serve about 4% of English language learners, compared to the 14.35% at the citywide level, which is the citywide ELL average. And only 5% of the special needs students are being served by charter schools, compared to the 15% citywide average. So there's definitely a big gap between the community that exists within the charter schools and the community in all of the public schools here in specifically New York City. Those things being something that really attract parents to charter schools, it seems like that should be something that across the board should be accessible to all students, whether or not you are in a charter school. So then one of the questions that it brings up is, do you have to have charter schools to have access to those kinds of resources? Shouldn't those resources be available to all students who are part of the public education system? And as was mentioned before, charter schools only kind of select certain students, and that just means that only a certain number of students will have access to the resources within the charter schools. So it brings into question as to who then is able to get the kind of education that all parents want their children to obtain.
You have the straight up, or the more clearly corporate kind of franchise chain, school model like Green Dot or that kind of thing. And then you have in New York more a patchwork of small charters. So it's a hodgepodge. It's just a question of the net effect. I believe the net effect is towards privatization and towards a breakup of the promise and the right to public education.
The mayor has even said in an interview with the Amsterdam News that the charter schools are the private schools or the prep schools for children of color. Listen to this. And the reason why this bothers you have to listen to this is this is a very touchy thing to say, because what he basically is promoting in that message, and I'm quoting. Front page of the Amsterdam interview with Naya Arinde, the editing, writing at the manager, so to speak. When you say that these are the private schools or the prep schools for children of color, then what are the ones for the other children? What does that sound like? Right? What does that sound like? And unequal. Separate and unequal.
I think with Bloomberg being with having mayoral control in New York City, it's really meant a big shift in how parents can be involved in the schools and how communities can be involved in the schools, because there's a lot of things that happen within the public school system here in New York City where parents can't have the space to really weigh in on the changes that have been happening and will continue to happen, especially now that there is an extension of mayoral control till 2015. And so that really, it seems like a lot of what he wants to do is really move towards these private-public partnerships, which the charter schools are one of the examples of that happening, right? Where there is public monies that go into charter schools, but then there's also a partnership with like corporations or private foundations to support other aspects, financially support other aspects of the charter schools. So moving more and more towards that direction, there is this weight on, you know, accountability and measures of how successful these charter schools are.
At the end of the day, in a public school setting, you have a right to that education, and therefore you as a parent have a right to demand something if it's not going the way that you want it to go. Obviously, parents are often discouraged from exercising that right, but you have that right nonetheless. Whereas in a privatized setting, if we move towards a privatized system of education, it's like you are then the customer, and you don't have the same set of rights. You're now, education is something that you are buying into, not something that you have as an intrinsic right just for living here.
The school that we actually met with some of the parents and the educators was at PS 241, and from what their experiences were like, they were mentioning how it was decided to close down the school very last minute. They didn't give enough notice to the parents. It didn't close down, but it was this process of parents really not being informed that this was happening in their school. And so in that same building, there's already a charter school that has taken over a couple of floors, and the plan was to take over 241 as well. And so a lot of questions were being brought up. So this new charter school that's going to open up and replace PS 241 isn't going to serve the same grades that PS 241 was going to serve. And so how were they going to phase out the grades? Where were the students going to go that would have gone to PS 241? And it was brought into question that a lot of the schools in that community were maybe too far away for some families. This was a community school, it was close by to certain families, and so now they would have to travel a lot further to have access to the education that they would have gotten at PS 241. So it was a sense of, you know, the changing of just a school community and what impact that would have for everyone who's part of that community. If that school had been there for so long, what does that mean when it's taken away?
Our school! Our school! Our school! Our school! Our school!